Hello, and thank you for joining the session today on automating operations with AWS Systems Manager. My name is Mark Bychowski. I'm a senior worldwide specialist with AWS Cloud Operations. I have over 25 years of IT delivery and leadership experience across energy and technology industries, but I've been with AWS for about 3 years now. So today, as I mentioned, we'll be talking about automating operations with AWS Systems Manager. That can be a pretty broad topic. So we'll focus today on number one, why should we care? And then get into a bit around what do we mean by operations? How does that fit into AWS Cloud Operations as a whole? Some of the common pain points we see customers having with operations, and spend the bulk of the time on how Systems Manager and other services can work together to solve that problem. And then finally, I'll leave you with some resources that you can take to research further. All right, so first off, don't worry, I'm not going to belabor any of these points, but really just wanted to use this slide to illustrate why AWS cares about automating cloud operations, and you should too. And it really boils down to 3 key points. So number one, reducing the total cost of operations through automation and improving efficiency. Number 2, decreasing downtime to your business and your customers. And number 3, improving agility and time to market. So just for a little bit of context around where this conversation fits into the overall topic of AWS Cloud Operations, AWS Cloud Ops is broken into basically 3 different areas. So first, the Cloud Ops model makes it easy to set up a foundation for operations. You can scale quickly with enterprise governance, and when you have security and multi-account built in, easily set up in minutes, deploy guardrails, and enable governance. Secondly, the Cloud Ops model helps you decide how much of your existing infrastructure and applications you're going to sustain, keep, migrate to the cloud, build new, etc. And thirdly, where we'll focus today on operating, so monitoring your application performance, detecting and remediating compliance, and operational risks. And there's really 3 categories within that operate pillar. Observability, which, as I mentioned before, using data-driven decisions to improve your visibility into the state of your resources and applications, collect data, monitor performance, analyze patterns, etc. Using compliance services, obviously compliance is top of mind for every organization, for internal, industry, local, and global regulations that are complex and dynamic. And AWS Cloud Ops helps you streamline those compliance and security requirements by automating many of the manual compliance tasks. And then lastly, with centralized operations, this is really about taking action on what you see. So everything comes together with in our central ops hub, and this is where we'll be spending most of the time today. So some of the common customer asks and pain points that we see. So I'll break these down into 2 categories at a high level. So enterprise customers typically tell us that obviously they want to get to the cloud quickly, but they want to maintain their operational alignment with ITIL processes and legacy processes that they've built over the years. So and things like incident management, change management, problem management, so forth. They've spent decades acquiring the experience across these different domains, and they've built operating models and solutions along with other tools and processes. Of course, they've also shared that many of the operations management tools tend to be monolithic, operate in silos, and of course not be cloud native and allow easy automation to their operations. Startups, on the other hand, want operations to be embedded in their development processes with a high degree of automation, so that operational best practices are built in as you try to get to market quickly. And based with these key feedback points in mind, that's really where our Cloud Ops model comes in with automation. So I'll spend the bulk of the time today talking through how our different services integrate to centralized operations with Systems Manager. And when I talk about a centralized operations solution, what I'm really referring to is a common set of integrated services with Systems Manager at the core. that lets your organization manage and automate IT operations. So how do we do that? So first off, starting from the bottom, AWS lets you automate operations processes across your environments with an agent-based management solution, Systems Manager, that works on AWS, on-prem, Edge, and IoT, and even other cloud providers. So that's done through the Systems Manager agent, which is an open source agent that can be installed on any of your cloud or on-prem resources or Edge resources, as I mentioned before. So as long as you can install the agent and have an internet connection to that device, it can be managed by Systems Manager. Excuse me. So with that, you can start your automation, ops automation process as you migrate. So you can have on-prem servers that are managed by Systems Manager along with EC2, for example, resources that you're spinning up. That way you can take advantage of those automations early on in the process. You don't have to wait until everything's all on the cloud. Or if you're in a situation where you have a complex hybrid or multi-cloud environment, you can still use a single set of services to automate operations. So on top of that, Systems Manager, as I mentioned, operates as your operations hub. We integrate data for resource configuration, observability, and compliance, as well as AI-driven DevOps data and other events from sources such as Config, CloudWatch, CloudTrail, DevOps Guru, EventBridge, and Security Hub, for example, to give you a consolidated lens to the state of your resources. We also have open APIs letting you integrate with third-party or custom data from your own built solutions. This is where automation comes in. So we help you automate frequent, high-risk, or compliance-related activities. And that's really the key to scaling while maintaining security, improving resiliency, reducing risk, and maintaining that agility that is one of the key reasons you're moving to the cloud in the first place. AWS has over 400 predefined automation documents or runbooks that you can use or customize for your environment, or you can build your own using Python or PowerShell. In addition to reducing time to resolution and reducing manual effort, but it also gives you the benefit of being able to improve your security posture by reducing individual access to the underlying infrastructure. And we do that through using delegated admin access for pre-approved runbooks. And basically what that means is the runbook itself can be given access to the resources as opposed to individual operators, reducing the number of people that have to have access to individual servers. So these automations can be triggered by any of your operations processes. And I'm just listing a few out. We have the next slide. We'll get into details on a few more of these capabilities. But just to highlight a few, I talked about some of the ITSM and ITIL types of processes earlier. So Change Manager is an example of this. Systems Manager Change Manager lets you define change templates and either automatically or manually approve them as your organization's process requires, and then trigger automated execution of those changes at a predefined time. Of course, maintaining logs of everything that was done, what was the change, who approved it, who executed, etc. Event management, and that's done with Systems Manager Ops Center, lets you identify issues, again, through the sources that I mentioned below, launch automations to resolve, or, for example, also trigger a change management operation if needed, or execute break glass actions, such as launching a session to troubleshoot and resolve an issue. And Incident Manager, another example, helps you define incident response plans for mission-critical applications, notify response teams, provide the relevant underlying resource data for troubleshooting purposes, collaborate across the team using AWS Chatbot, and resolve those incidents through, again, either automation or break glass processes that I mentioned earlier. Finally, it provides root cause analysis data and recommended next steps to include problem management to resolve or to prevent a recurrence of incidents. It's worth mentioning that in subsequent sessions today, Sonia will be covering change management in much more detail, and Sarah will be covering incident manager in much more detail as well. Finally, in the area of node management, this gives you a variety of different capabilities such as inventory, patch management, remote session management, and many more that can all interact with those automations. And we'll get into more detail on that in the next slide. Now, for customers who are using ITSM solutions such as ServiceNow or Jira Service Management, the AWS Service Management Connector gives you bidirectional integration with the capabilities that I mentioned below, eliminating manual processes and data entry. So specifically with Change Manager, Ops Center, and Incident Manager. And these processes and automations that I mentioned can be performed at a resource or fleet level, as well as an application or workload level as defined by AWS Service Catalog App Registry, for example, resource groups or tagging. And lastly, audit data such as state of resources, alerts, alarms, compliance rule status, actions performed by who and when. All of that data is collected throughout the process and can be surfaced through Systems Manager natively or holistically through AWS Audit Manager to simplify audit data collection and reporting. Now, it's important to understand that while obviously one of the key value propositions here is that all of these capabilities integrate together and work together, most of those capabilities can be used independently of each other, letting you adopt individual service capabilities at a pace that works best for your organization. For example, many customers will use services such as Session Manager or Patch Manager as their entry point into getting familiar with Systems Manager before branching out to more complex IT processes. So I mentioned that we talk a bit more around some of the other capabilities within Systems Manager. So for anyone who's taken a look at the Systems Manager console, it can be a little bit intimidating. So I just wanted to cover some of these capabilities with you. And we've divided these out into three main areas: node management, IT service management, and application management. So I'll go through and describe some of these capabilities. Now, foundationally at the bottom of the slide, you see Quick Setup. As the name implies, Quick Setup helps you set up Systems Manager's features easily for many of our use cases, such as scanning instances for missing patches, configuring collection of inventory, creating and configuring IAM profile roles if needed, and many more. Automation we talked about on the previous slide, of course, one of the key capabilities across Systems Manager. And again, letting you eliminate those manual errors in your environment by authoring repeatable runbooks triggered by Event Bridge, maintenance windows, state manager associations, change manager, and more. So starting off on the left with node management, Our node management features are intended to give operators the tools they need to perform day-to-day activities to maintain your environment. Fleet Manager helps you manage your fleet of servers, browse file systems, monitor CPU metrics, and edit Windows registries, or even RDP, open RDP sessions to Windows resources. Session Manager provides secure and auditable privileged access to your compute nodes for break glass scenarios, troubleshooting, etc., without the need for bastion host, inbound firewall exceptions, and managing SSH keys. Inventory collects data about your applications, files, network configuration, instance details, Windows registries, and roles. Run command lets you execute controlled actions across any or all selected nodes in your fleet, or as referred to before, the automation documents. Patch Manager, as the name implies, lets you automate patching of your cloud and on-prem and other cloud resources at scale. Parameter Store is a central store to externalize your configuration values and secrets in one location, organized by environment or application component hierarchies. Distributor lets you create new or deploy existing software packages, including AWS published and third-party packages, to multiple managed instances at one time. End State Manager gives you secure and scalable configuration management, corrects configuration drift by periodically checking and remediating changes to keep your resources in your pre-configured desired state. Shifting over to the middle category, IT Service Management, these work in concert with other AWS services, as I mentioned, leveraging automation to bring visibility and automate resolution of issues. As I mentioned before, they can work independently, or if you have an ITSM solution like ServiceNow or Jira Service Desk, can integrate through the Service Management Connector. Explorer is your operations dashboard across Systems Manager, so it gives you insights across your accounts and regions through sources such as config, trusted advisor, compute optimizer, support cases, patching, and more. Op Center we talked about earlier is our event management engine. Incident Manager we talked about earlier, and as I mentioned, Sarah will be getting into that in much more detail later on today. And Change Manager, again, we've talked about, and Sonia will be covering that in much more detail. Maintenance window lets you define a schedule for when to perform potentially disruptive actions on your instances, such as patching OS, updating drivers, installing software, etc. Or simply put, define when you can make those changes. Change Calendar, on the other hand, defines date and time ranges when actions you specify may or may not be performed in your account to avoid business impact, or simply put, define when you cannot make those changes. So, for example, a quarter close period. And finally, on the right side, Systems Manager's application management features help you manage and operate your application resources in a context relevant to your application team and resource structures. Application Manager helps you manage applications across multiple AWS services like CloudFormation stacks, resource groups, Launch Wizard, Service Catalog, App Registry, EKS clusters. You can view operational data and alarms and take actions to remediate issues. And App Config lets you create, manage, and deploy application configuration changes at runtime. You can automatically roll back changes in case of errors and toggle new application features that require a timely deployment. Now, I know that was a lot to cover, so wanted to leave you with a couple lists of some references here. So just some examples of some of the customers who've had a lot of success with Systems Manager. And I'll just leave these here for you to read. But so we have quite a bit of adoption of Systems Manager. We manage over 20 million distinct instances each week. So it is definitely a service that operates at scale. And leave you with a few key takeaway points here. So one, as I mentioned before, automating operations is critical to reducing your total cost of operations, reduce your downtime, and improve agility. Secondly, that we enable that through Systems Manager, integrating with AWS and external solutions to automate operations across all of your environments, AWS, on-prem, other cloud, etc. And thirdly, prioritizing your use cases is typically the key to success. So rather than trying to automate all of your operations in one massive project, prioritizing those individual use cases such as patch, session management, or even parameter centralization with Systems Manager can be a good place to start. And I'll leave this up for a minute here. These are resources links to some of our resources that let you get hands-on with AWS Cloud Ops services. So on the left, we have our AWS Cloud Ops workshops. There are workshops in there that cover observability, compliance, and then centralized operations, which is where Systems Manager falls. But again, let you get hands-on with the different capabilities that we talked about today. There's also a skill builder class that is free online. The second link there to get on getting started with Systems Manager, learning how to use the agent, etc. And then on the right side are blogs and videos, which cover numerous different use cases with Systems Manager, as well as customer examples, and demos, etc. And with that, wanted to thank everyone for participation today.